All right, let's just jump right in, because this is a big one. AWS just did something that completely changes one of its oldest, most foundational services. We're talking about S3, right? The place where a huge chunk of the internet's data lives. Well, they just turned it into a vector database. They built vector search directly into the storage layer. It's like they taught S3 how to think.
But why does that matter? Why should you care? Well, it all comes down to this number right here, almost $10,000 a month. That's a real-world cost for running a traditional vector database at scale once you hit about 1 billion vectors. See, the biggest problem in AI right now isn't always the tech itself. It's the absolutely staggering cost of doing it at scale.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll dig into that AI cost trap. Then, we'll see how this whole storage that thinks thing actually works under the hood. We'll get to the juicy part, that 90% cost advantage, then figure out when you should and shouldn't use this thing. And finally, we'll zoom out and look at how this one little change could reshape the entire AI playing field.
Okay, so let's tackle that billion vector problem. You know, all the cool AI stuff today, especially things like retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, it all runs on vector embeddings. You take your documents, your images, whatever, and you turn them into these long strings of numbers that capture their meaning. But here's the catch. Storing and searching billions of these things, well, it gets really expensive and super complex really fast.
And this is exactly where Amazon S3 Vectors comes into the picture. Now, what's so interesting here is the fundamental trade-off they're offering. See, traditional vector databases, they're built for one thing: raw, blistering speed. But that speed comes with a hefty price tag and a lot of management headaches. S3 Vectors just flips that whole idea on its head. It aims for a radically lower cost and pretty much zero management, and in return, you get what they call fast enough performance.
So, how in the world does this actually work? Well, the key idea is that search and storage are now the same thing. This isn't some new service that you connect to S3. No, vector search is now a native capability of S3 itself. Your embeddings live right there in S3's super durable storage, and you can query them without having to pull everything into some expensive, memory-hungry service first.
The whole foundation for this is a brand new concept, the vector bucket. Just think of it like a special kind of S3 bucket, one that's been purpose-built not just for storing your vectors, but, and this is the important part, for indexing them too. It's the piece of magic that turns S3 from a passive digital file cabinet into an active, smart database for your AI data. And for developers, the workflow is just beautifully simple. 1, you create a vector bucket. 2, you define your index, the dimensions and the distance metric. 3, you start pushing your vectors in batches of up to 500. And 4, you query them to get your top results. That's it. Seriously. No clusters to spin up, no servers to patch, it's just there. So the big takeaway here is that S3 Vectors gets all the superpowers that S3 already has. It's serverless, so you're not managing a single piece of infrastructure. It's got that legendary 11 nines of durability, which means your data is ridiculously safe. It's deeply plugged into the whole AWS ecosystem, and of course, it's secure from the get-go with encryption and IAM. Okay, now for the aha moment, the part that really makes this a potential game changer. We've talked about cost, but let's get specific and see just how dramatic this shift really is. AWS is claiming this can be over 90% cheaper. And a number like that, well, it changes the entire economic equation for what's possible with AI. So let's actually break down the numbers for our billion vector scenario. With a traditional service, you're paying a few hundred for storage, sure, but then thousands for the compute power to keep that index ready, and hundreds more for the computers that handle the queries. With S3 Vectors, every single one of those line items just plummets. Why? Because you're paying for cheap S3 storage and a simple pay-per-request model, not for always-on, expensive compute.
And this chart just says it all, doesn't it? It puts it right there in plain sight. Over $9,000 a month versus $271. That is not just a little bit better. It's a completely different universe of cost. It's a fundamental shift in the economics of building AI.
But of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? You don't get that massive cost saving without a trade-off. And the trade-off here is performance, latency. So it is absolutely critical to understand when S3 Vectors is the perfect tool for the job and when you still need to reach for one of those high-performance engines. So where does S3 Vectors really shine? Well, think of huge, mostly stable datasets.
If you're building a RAG system on top of Amazon Bedrock, this is your new best friend. If you want to do semantic search over a massive data lake, or you're running recommendation engines that only update in batches, this is the sweet spot. Basically, it's perfect for any app where cost is a huge concern and scale matters more than the absolute lowest latency.
So, where does it fall short? If you need that consistent, sub-50 millisecond response time for a real-time app, this is not the tool for you. Same goes if you need to handle thousands of queries per second, or if your data is constantly changing with high-frequency updates. For those kinds of jobs, you still need a purpose-built, high-speed engine.
But here's the really clever part. AWS has an answer for this, a tiered architecture. The idea is you use S3 vectors as your massive, super cheap storage layer for all your vectors. And then you use a high-performance engine like Amazon OpenSearch for just the hot data, the stuff that needs that split-second response time. It's the best of both worlds. You get massive scale at a low cost and high performance exactly where you need it.
So let's zoom all the way out. What does this really mean for the bigger AI landscape? Well, honestly, this is a classic AWS move. They watch as innovative startups create a new market, and then they build that same capability right into their core platform as a basic, cheap, commoditized feature.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. S3 Vectors is all about strengthening what we call data gravity. Look, if all your embeddings live cheaply and easily in S3, right next to all your other data, you're way more likely to just use AWS's own AI services like Bedrock or SageMaker. It makes the entire AWS ecosystem stickier and much, much harder for competitors to break into.
The bigger impact here is that vector search is quickly moving from being this specialized, complex, expensive tool to just becoming table stakes infrastructure. It's becoming a fundamental building block, like a key value store or a message queue, something you just expect your cloud provider to have and for it to be cheap and easy to use.
And that's really the bottom line. It's not just about the tech itself. It's about what becomes possible when a powerful capability suddenly becomes 90% cheaper. It means you can now afford to embed everything, your entire data lake, years of company archives. Which leaves us with the most important question of all. When vector search is this cheap and this easy, what are you going to build with it?